Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. How's everybody
Morning.
doing? Good to see you guys in here. We're going live on Facebook too, or YouTube right now as well too. So we're a bit early. How you guys doing? There it is.
Great. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good to join us in here. We'll get a few people in here. I know I've had people asking me already, so we'll just let them stream on in, I hope, and get everybody going here. I'm going to talk about some portrait lighting and some making clean plates. There are a couple of requests. We'll review that in a second. You don't need, Tim, you don't need to just click on the link in StreamYard and you'll show up. No, you guys didn't have to get any software to go into StreamYard, right? That's the idea. Don't know how to log it. No need to log in. Just click the link. There you go. Not ink, link, sorry. So yeah, you should be able to get in, Tim, no problem. I'm not sure what Rusty's deal is here, but we'll add him to the stream. I don't know. I think I can get 6 people in here. We'll see what happens. So yeah. Hello, Bernd. Good afternoon. I know where Bernd is. He's in Germany. And we're live on Facebook too. So let me just make sure we're good to go here. Get everybody going here. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello.
So how's everybody doing? I hope you're healthy and well and prosperous and all that good stuff. I'm not outside today. I decided I wanted to be able to see the screen a little bit better. So I'm going to share a couple of images with you. So I wanted to be able to see what I'm showing that makes sense while I talk about both lighting. We're going to talk about, Tim wrote this last week and asked about lighting, portrait lighting, using what Collodion, natural lighting. Most of what you see now is all, continuous light or strobe. You see a lot of that stuff, and I understand why people do that. But I'm going to talk about natural lighting, and we'll see if we can't clear up some areas that people have problems with or not understand how to do this, because it's different than traditional digital or film, right? This is we're Collodion. We see a completely different kind of image, and it's sensitive to different kinds of different kind of light. So we're going to talk about that. And then I had a request. I don't know if this person is going to be able to get in here or not, but I had a request about making clean plates and having some techniques to make it artifact free, basically, is what we're talking about. So we'll talk about those things and get everybody kind of going on here. I'm going to share a couple of images about the lighting, and I'm going to show you a little illustration about lighting. So if you're interested in what Collodion portrait you're lighting, this might be a good one to hang out for. So give a sec and everybody will get in here. Let me make sure that I have keep these chat rooms open and make sure people see what's going on. So we're on YouTube and we're on StreamYard. StreamYard seems to be easier for me. I know we can only have 6 people, but you can watch it. You can watch it later on YouTube. You can, the chat's always open, so you can drop questions in there if you need to. So let's go ahead and get started. Tim Fry, he's on the YouTube stream right now. Tim Fry asked this week, and I don't have his email up right now, but I'll paraphrase what he asked. He asked about what's the deal with using wet Collodion with natural light and doing portraits. As we all know, we talked about last week quite extensively, and the week prior even, we all know that once you take a camera outside your studio, you're going to have a whole different ball game with light. Even if you're using natural window light in the studio, once you get out into that high UV or very strong light, even if it's overcast, you're going to have a completely different experience. Normally, using wet Collodion versus doing the standard kind of continuous light People often ask me, why do you teach in your workshops? Why do you teach continuous light versus natural light, or use strobes? In the end there, I was using strobes before I moved up here. Two reasons. Continuous fluorescent light, or compact fluorescent light, CFL as they call it. It's 5600 daylight, so it's geared toward that temperature, that Kelvin temperature. And if you know photography and you've worked traditionally, you know what Kelvin temperature is. And daylight is 5600 degrees Kelvin, so it's geared toward that. So it's collodion will be sensitive. There's quite a bit of UV in there, not a whole lot. I mean, we use it in our houses and all that stuff, but there's UV in there, so it's good for collodion that way. And moreover, I used it teaching wet collodion for the simple fact that when you're outdoors and you're trying to make images, like I talked last week, you're chasing that light. Your cloud coverage, time of day, you only have a small window, I say from about 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. or 1400. 10 a.m. to 1400 is kind of your window of time. I'm going to show you a little illustration here in a second. And you really only, I mean, you can make images year-round outdoors, but in the wintertime, when the sun goes low versus when it's high in the sky, summertime's the best time to make images. And at the end of the day, we want maximum light. So between, say, and this is in the northern hemisphere, not the southern hemisphere, it's opposite, right? So in the northern hemisphere, from May to about September, the 1st of May to the 1st of September, you're going to have generally that sun is going to peak at third week in June, the solstice, right? And then it'll start lowering in the sky and coming down. What we're after is that bright actinic light. But when you're out there, you're chasing the light. So when people are just starting out in this process, it's very difficult, like spinning a bunch of plates on your fingertips. You're already spinning enough. They're already nervous enough. I just didn't want to have to deal with people trying to figure out light, the process, the technique, learning about the chemistry. You know, we only had 2 or 3 days normally. So to compress that and take that lighting issue away, compact fluorescent lights, 5600 Kelvin, perfect temperature, 3 to 600 watts. With a fast Petzval lens, you could get 2 and 3 second exposures with fresh collodion. So at the end of the day, it was for me teaching the people the techniques in the process. What they'll learn later on is how to use their lighting and what they want to do with it. So anyway, that's what one of the questions I had was, why do you teach continuous lighting or strobe lighting? Artificial lighting is a better way to put it. Why do you use artificial lighting in your workshops, but you make 99% of your images in daylight or natural light? And that's why. On the workshop side, it's for convenience for the student. Now, you come and do a negative workshop with me, making negatives. We're not going to use artificial light for negatives. We're definitely going to be outdoors. We're going to be using the sun, or actually not the sun, but the actinic light I'm going to talk about today. So there's a big difference between those two types of light. And can you make a negative in artificial light? Yes, you can. But it's not going to be as good. It's not going to be as effective as using natural light. So on to Tim's question. What about using natural light for portraiture work? The general rule, and I'm going to show you a couple examples here if I can. The general rule, I forgot how to screen share. There we go. The general rule is you want to use, and I'll first use this one. It's the one I used for my little advertisement for the show today. The general rule is you want to use the north light. So I made a little, forgive my illustration here. I made a little illustration here. So if you have a subject, our little guy, our little stick man sitting on a stool there, he's sitting under shade, and he's basically, he or she is facing north. And that light is called actinic light. So you have your camera pointed to the subject using the north light, and it's shaded as well too, right? It's kind of all over. So you've got your camera pointed in, you're shaded, and yet the north light is coming in. It's shaded north light. Now, why is that? If you walk outside today, and hopefully you're sunny like I am here, this direction is north to my right over here, and I can look up in the sky. The sun is about right, well, it's kind of over here right now, but I can look up north here, and I'll see that big blue sky. And that big blue sky, north facing, is the strongest UV light, actinic light, strong UV. That's the light you want to use. But you want to use it shaded. And I'll show you an example here. This is just coming out. I think I made this. I made this on the Main River up in Germany. So this is out in full light. Maybe a little bit of haze over top, and yes, I have some solvent streaks on that image. That's neither here nor there. That's using the full light, so everything's illuminated, right? This is a Künstler, a painter. I used to go up on in Frankfurt in Germany. I used to go up on the river, and there were a bunch of plein air painters up there, and I got to know them, and I'd photograph them. And so this is full on next to the river. Fairly bright light. I would say it's probably 11 o'clock in the morning this image was made. And so that's full on. I didn't use a disc or anything. I just sat him up, actually he's up kind of against a stone wall, and I photographed him facing north, my camera facing in, a little bit of not so much shade. There was some trees there, but that's pretty much full on light. Now, what you can do in my home in Germany, I had what's called a winter garden, or a covered patio, as we say in English, a covered patio. And that was actually north facing. And what I could do is I could use the south side of it as kind of the shadow side and use the north for light. And then I could even bounce some light in. So the next image I want to show you is controlling that north light a little bit. And that once you control that north light, you can start really maximizing the quality. And the reason I like to use natural light is because absolute quality of it, right? So now, you know, obviously this is a positive. Actually, this is a negative, but I flipped it around. So he's on the left side as you look at this image. That's actually the north side. You can see in his catch of the light in his eye where I bounced some light up on the south side, on the right side of his face, just to fill that in just a little bit. His head's completely separated. That's a black background that I popped a little light in. But you can see the quality of light using natural light. It's fuller. It's just a lot more beautiful. At the end of the day, when you use artificial light, the color to me is a little bit off. I don't like the color it produces so much. Sometimes you can get it right, but it's just the flat. Even if you have, I know it's kind of a contradiction in terms, but even if you have a contrasty image, the details are lost. It's not as subtle. And remember, this process wasn't invented. There was no electricity, right, when this process was invented. So they weren't using strobes or CFLs or anything. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with doing that. I'm just saying to produce the maximum quality image that you can, I would say north light, actinic light, and use it, especially portraiture for skin tone, or window light. So now the next one I want to show you, I made in my studio in Denver, and I had a big 10-foot north-facing, kind of northeast facing window. It was a big one, but I want to show you this image. This is controlling a little bit more of the light and using a white background for separation. One of the big problems you'll see in portraits today, or there's just a white face or a face hanging in black. There's no separation of the head. That's just not really good lighting technique. So sometimes you'll want to separate that out. And here's an example of that. So, and I'm going to show you a color photograph of her as well too. So this is window light. You can see, look in the catch in her eyes, the big block, the big catch in her eye. I don't know if my mouse shows up, but that right there and that right there is my window. This little tiny one here on the dark iris, and here is the fill light coming up on the other side to fill this area in. It's actually opposite because it's a tintype. But now look at her, and let's look at her clothing, and look at how this is. Can you see that? I'm not sure if you can you guys see that? No, let's do this window. Oh, I might have to go back and share it over again. Sorry. Let's look at her clothing now. She's holding the image, so you'll be able to see it. So here you can see this is red, and look at how dark this is. So now we're starting to deal with color. So you have to be aware of the color. Another thing natural light does better than artificial light is reproduce the color, although it's collodion, right? Red is up in that 600-700 nanometer area. It's almost like it's black. Yellows are quite dark, et cetera, all the way down to the violets. But you can see the red circles here are almost, you can't almost see them, but look at that natural light coming in for the window. It really reproduces that well. Then look at her scarf, that wonderful violet, just almost like pure white. So as we look at natural light and we look at how collodion sees color, and we start playing with that, how to work it, how to fill it in, paying attention to colors, what kind of background do you use? One thing that I really don't like very much, although I'll give you an example of the closest I come to it. One of the things that I don't like very much is when people make portraits and just have the face there. As much as I love Caravaggio, I don't like extreme like that. I mean, just a face and there's no hair separation. You know, kind of going back to the traditional lighting for portraiture, not necessarily Rembrandt, but you know, somewhere in there, Rembrandt lighting would be a good example of that. But so let me show you one more. I want to show you actually a couple of examples here. Let me close these windows down. So the closest I would get, this is overhead lighting. And again, this is, I wanted to, you'll see what I'm going for here, kind of a scary, evil look thing here. This is overhead lighting. So her hair's illuminated, very shallow depth of field. And then I let the light fall off down below, right? So as in a dark background, that background was really dark green, very little light getting in there. So again, no, look at her eyes. Here's the north light coming in, right? Her whites of her eyes are all lit up. The bridge of her nose, obviously, she had light blondish hair. All that's lit up there. So you can see, depending on what you want to do, this I'm shooting kind of down on her. You can see the light coming in, streaming in, always the same thing, always using that north actinic light. And one more here. Here's another example of using a little bit of north light, little different positioning, but again, same thing. A little bokeh back there, something shining through the background, maybe a little bit, but totally illuminated. Really, really tight, right? Just really, really in there. No eyes, had her looking off with her cigarette, that kind of thing. So, and then, yeah, so that's what I'm talking about. When I talk about north light and some examples of using those, either window, a winter garden, full on, a little bit overcast. You just have to play with that, but never, you know, the last thing you want to do is you don't want to use that typical like film or digital light, because once that sun, after about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you're going to have a very difficult time making collodion images, because that Kelvin temperature, as the sun goes low in the sky, starts dropping down, and that what we call the golden hour typically in photography is about 3,000 Kelvin. Can you make an image? Yes, you can make an image in collodion with it, but your exposures are going to be extremely long. If you're miscalculating the light you're using, if you're trying to use the west light, like where the sun's going down and that Kelvin temperature drops down like that, your exposures are going to get very long and you're going to be very, very contrasty, or you're going to overdevelop, or you're going to, and then on the other hand, if you put people blazing right out in the middle of the sun in the middle of the day, you're going to have the opposite thing. You're going to have their skin blow out. You're going to, that's where I haven't had the shade, but I can still use the north light, but it's full light. I'll use a black disc and I'll put over their head. Face them north, put a black disc over their head, let the background blow out, and you get a beautiful exposure on the portrait. So there's some tricks to it. It's just a matter of having the time and the energy to pay attention to the time of day, the time of year you're making the portrait, and using your equipment the best you can, in the best way possible. I have always, especially between May and September, granted, and even in Germany though, at 100 feet above sea level, here the exposures are extremely, extremely fast. But even at sea level, with a good Petzval lens and good chemistry, you're only talking 2 or 3 seconds. Here it would be less than a second, maybe even a quarter of a second up here, this high at 2,700 meters or 8,500 feet. So pay attention to the time of year, the type of lens you're using, the time of day, your chemistry, and how you're illuminating and what light you're using on that subject, whether it's a person or a still life or a landscape. There are better times to make landscapes than not, just like in film photography. So there's a lot going on in using natural light for portraits, and you're limited, just like the process, right? You're limited on how much you can do, where you can do it, what time of year you can do it with. You're not going to, go out, and make, it's very difficult to make portraits in bad light. I mean, and when I talk about bad light, I mean, you may see visually, it looks like it's great, it's bright, it's wonderful, and you can't make a portrait. Your images just don't work for you. And it's probably due to the fact either the light itself, the quality of light, the time of day, the time of year, your chemistry, maybe you're using a modern lens, that has a little bit of coating on it. Those can either be a great help or a hindrance, right? Sometimes they act as a neutral density filter. If you're so bright, like modern lenses up here would be great because you get the advantage of cutting some of that UV out. But there's a lot of plates spinning, so to speak, when you're trying to do natural light portraits. And those are the topics you want to look for. Pay attention to the direction your sitter's facing or your subject. Pay attention to the direction your camera is going. Another thing, if you're using vintage lenses and you're using a Petzval lens, let's say you're doing a portrait and you're using a Petzval lens wide open, that's a big chunk of glass, right? That's why they have the big flanges on them. That light can get in there and bounce around, and you can have flares and streaks and all kinds of stuff. Point your Petzval lens east in the morning and west in the evening or afternoon, and try to make an image. That light will bounce around and strike your plate like crazy. I've had not leaks, but streaks and light. Just that glass really doesn't control it at all. It's just a free flow of light in there. That's a good thing and a bad thing. Modern lenses are coated. They take the light in straight. That's why they don't have those big flanges on them, right? They can handle that. You can point them directly at a sunset and still capture with the right exposure. You can capture the foreground. That'll never happen with a Petzval lens. So pay attention to all that stuff. It's really important. And the natural light, once you kind of, I don't want to say master it, but once you play with it enough and you're comfortable enough with it, you can really, it's really wonderful to work with. And I think you'll have much better luck with it. I think they're better looking portraits than the artificial light. I think they're just better looking. I think they're higher quality and just better looking overall. So that kind of covers it. Tim, if you have questions on that, chime in. I'm open, or anyone. Tim asked the question, but I'm open to questions on that. My absolute favorite though is natural light, north shaded natural light portraits. There's Jeannie in the background.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. So let's see. Okay, Tim says, so practically speaking, what's your workflow when you had, let's see what, thank you. Let's see what he says. Finish your question there, Tim, and I'll answer it. Let's see. Vocal slide. Quinn, do you prefer some special high-speed Collodion recipe? No. You know, in fact, that's a good question, but in fact, the opposite. I love a well-aged for, you know, like I said, I do love Caravaggio. So I love higher contrast, but detailed images. And one of the things with the tonal range in Collodion, and we've talked about this quite a bit, is that the fresher the Collodion, the tonal range is not going to be as good as in kind of a higher iodized collodion. I like an orange, darker, orangish, maybe borderline, definitely yellow going into orange, and then even orange beyond that. If you have my book, I have an illustration in there talking about highly iodized or a slightly iodized collodion. The slightly iodized collodion is going to be fast, quote, fast in ISO, but won't produce the tonal range you'll get in a more highly iodized collodion. So I like the higher iodized collodion, not the red, but you can do that, especially if you're making negatives. They're wonderful. But for positive portraits in natural light, I kind of like an orangish, maybe even a dark orange sometimes, depending on the light and the time of year I'm doing it. But that'll give me the tonal range. So I'm a big stickler on tonal range. This process can produce tonal range like nothing else if you do it right. And exposure and the type of the iodized how highly iodized or slightly iodized your collodion is going to determine how much contrast you have in the image. So Tim says, so practically speaking, what's your workflow when you have your clients show up? So yeah, when I'm going to do a portrait, I will have already established the day. Obviously, I look at the weather, right? I'm going to work outside, so I look at the weather. I'll establish a day that we want to do it, that works for them, of course. And then the time period. Obviously, I like them to show up around 10 o'clock. Let's say it's this time of year. I like to have them show up at 10, 9:30, even in the morning. And I will have already produced a couple of plates before they show up, just some test plates. Check my chemistry, check my exposure, and get it dialed in a little bit before they show up. That'll give me a couple of hours, at least, in the best light. Now, remember, from 10 o'clock to about 12 noon, your light is going to increase. The amount of light's going to increase, so your exposure is going to drop down, either half seconds, quarter seconds, whatever it is. It depends on where you're at. After 1300, 1400 hours, 1 or 2 p.m. in the afternoon, your exposures are going to start slightly increasing. And depending on the time of the year, spring, it's going to be more exacerbated or more exaggerated. And the fall, it's going to be more exaggerated, meaning either growing times or diminishing times. That's because the position the sun rises up over our heads in the summertime and drops low in the wintertime. And as we know the Earth rotates on its axis, tilts on its axis and rotates. So as we look at that position, that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with that light. So the workflow says before they show up, pick the good weather day, pick a good time of day, again, between 10 and 2. The earlier you can do it, the better. You just keep in mind that your first exposures will start in your first few plates. You will decrease the exposure because the light will increase. If you make plates for several hours, you'll start to see those exposure times come down after about 1400 or 2 p.m. I have, the setup I always have in place, the background that I want to use, and I'm also very cognizant or very aware of what this. I often ask people to wear something dark or darker and I'm cognizant of the color of their hair. Do they have red hair? Do they have black hair? Do they have blonde hair? Where is that, and what kind of background am I going to work against or with? Do I have to illuminate it? Do I have to do something different? How many discs do I have? And I always have 2 or 3 discs out, right? I have a black disc, I have a silver disc, I have a gold disc, and they're quite large. They're like 40 inches. They're over 3 feet wide. So I can really bounce and manipulate the light, whether I need to block it, add it, take it away. Again, I don't want a face hanging on a black background. I don't like that, like a clay face hanging on a black background. It's not appealing to me at all. So I have, and that's another thing, yes, I always make portraits with my Petzval lenses. Now, occasionally, if you want to get a more traditional look, like a silver gelatin look, you can use a modern lens and, 5.6, f8. If you got really good light, you can get, 5, 6, 8 seconds, anything below 10 seconds where the subject can sit, and you always want to have a head brace, always, even for a 2-second exposure, because people will tremor and they'll shake their head a little bit. You always want to have a head brace, your background, your backdrop, your background figured out. And then if you want a more traditional look and feel, those modern lenses, if you have enough light, are great. It'll look like, there's a whole bunch of, I've got some on my Facebook page and stuff. You can look around. Most people are using modern lenses now. I noticed a few years ago, the Russians kind of started this thing where, probably because of light, right? They're post 40 on latitude, longitude, right? Or longitude, sorry. They're post 40 on that. So they're, 45, 48, whatever they are up there. So they're going to lose the light first. And so they started using powerful strobes and modern lenses. And you can look at an image and tell. I can tell you if it's artificial light and if it's a modern or vintage lens. Most of the time, not always, but they're very distinct looks. They're very different. Okay, so Tim recently acquired a Dallmeyer 3B, freakishly fast. Yes, most of my work is done with a Dallmeyer 3B or a DeRogi. I have a DeRogi F28, which is really incredible. Yeah, and sometimes it's too fast. So great. The wonderful thing about the Dallmeyer 3B or my DeRogi, it's cut for Waterhouse stops. So it's got a slice in the barrel. You can make Waterhouse stops, calculate the opening, get you a drill bit, drill press, or drill gun, and make you some, just out of aluminum, right, black aluminum, make you some Waterhouse stops. So that way you can stop down. Now, if you want to use that shallow depth of field, you're going to move further away out of that north light, and you might even use a black disc and subtract or take away light. And you can start getting into those Petzval lenses in daylight and still be at 1 or 2 seconds. I like the the vintage lenses for portraits are absolutely my favorite without question. They just and I'm not a reenactor. There's none of that involved. It's just I love that 19th century look and feel for portraits. I've talked a lot about this. I'm a little bit more painterly as I get a little older. I kind of like the softness. I'm a frustrated painter, so I love that Künstler, this guy here. You can really see. Look at his shirt here. I love the fall off on. I love the fall off down here. That's just the Petzval lens. It's just a softness, and I just love everything about that. It's just a good look and feel for me. That's what I'm after. I'm after, again, to tie this kind of conceptually into everything. One of my words, the 4 words that I use for my work, like table legs: memory, identity, difference, and justice. Those 4 words kind of hold my work up. The first one is memory. The aesthetic that I go for, especially in portraits, I want to aesthetically represent that word, memory. I want to have it feel old. I want it to have its own kind of life in the past, so to speak, because a lot of my work revolves around marginalized communities and historical events and things like that. So there's reasons I use the lenses, the process, the lighting, all that stuff. There are reasons I use and go for those specific things, both for the aesthetics and both to support the work and talk about the work. And again, I'm not a process photographer, but the process is important. The process needs to support and inform the work itself. And the choice of lens, the choice of light, the choice of process, the choice of final product even, right? Is it a print? Is it a positive? Is it on glass? Is it on metal? All those things mean something, especially to the viewer, especially to the informed viewer that's coming to learn about something like you pick up a book. I thought I had the Republic right next to me, Plato. You pick up a book and you want to learn something. You want to hear that narrative. So it's in order. There's purpose to the words they use. It's just like artists. All artists do that. Photographers get away with murder when it comes to this stuff, right? We can do anything we want. And I think it was Dale last week talking about artifacts and calling it artful, kind of whatever. And it's kind of funny, but at the same time, it's true. So we kind of get away with a lot. Musicians have to, hit chords or play notes in a certain way and have music come out a certain way. There's a methodology. Writers have to do the same thing. Normally painters do. Photographers, we can kind of, it's democratized, kind of everybody does it, and we get away with a lot. We can do a lot and never have to justify it or defend it, and people can kind of, they get away with that. So it's a long way around talking about natural light portraits, but it's a big deal to me to have purpose to the type of lens I use, to the type of light I use, to the type of process that I use, and the end product. Is it an oil print on glass? Is it a positive on metal? What format is it? What size is it? What's the reason behind all of that? Can really either support your narrative or story or your work or your project, or it can detract from it immensely, especially when you're asked about it and you don't have an answer, and you have an informed viewer come along and they're looking at a project and they're looking at you, wanting to delve into that project a little more, that work a little more, and your answers are, I don't know. I just happen to have that. I just happen to do that. Now, I'm not saying, I'm open for serendipity too, right? I'm open for happy chance. So I'm not saying everything is a strict path and we're going down this road and there's no detours. Not at all. I'm saying I do have a path. It's projected, and these are the types of tools I'm going to use to try to achieve that. If something else happens along the line and it fits into that, well, I'll go with that. I'm open. It's not like, it's not all science, right? There's art, it's alchemy, it's art and science. And that's a beautiful thing about this process, I think, is you have to have enough science involved in it for it to work. And you have to be open for that little bit of alchemy or that artistry to come in. And I think a well-rounded image, a well-lit portrait, a well-composed portrait, whatever it is, it really speaks volumes in this process if it's done right and it's part of a larger narrative or a larger context of the work. So all of that said, kind of a long way around talking about lighting and portraiture, but at the end of the day, that's what we're dealing with, right? We're dealing with what is it? How do you make this stuff work, and how do you get the best results? Hey, Jan, welcome. So we're just talking about natural light portraits, and you're very welcome, Tim. I'm glad I could help. I hope that helps. And you're welcome to jump in with any other questions. So let's talk about if there's anything else on portraits or light or whatever conceptual stuff. Just chime in. We'll take care of you. But let's talk about making what it is to make clean plates. And let me define what I mean by clean plates. Somebody asked me this week, actually a couple of people asked about artifacts, a couple of different types of artifacts. One was oysters, and the other one, they both dealt with artifacts coming from the edge of the plate. And they're mostly oysters. Let's just say oysters for this example. So oysters, what are oysters? There's a type of artifact that you'll see, and they're not always on the edge, but most of the time they are. There's a type of artifact that comes from organic material on the plate, touching the plate, or usually on the plate holder itself. And this is mostly where these kind of dirty edge plates come from. You'll see this white stuff streaking down the plate, or you'll see, and they call them oyster shells because sometimes that organic material will actually form a little, it'll look like an oyster. You crack open an oyster, it'll look like that center pearl, and then all the rings from outside of it. That's why they call them oyster shells. But they can appear as lines and big material dripping down. That's organic material interacting with your silver, right? So that 99% of the time, that means that when you poured your plate, put it in your silver bath, pulled it out of your silver bath, wipe the back off. Maybe you didn't wipe the back off too, but wipe the back off and put it down in your plate holder. It's usually because in your plate holder where that image rests, and especially if it's a ledge, not so much with the wire hangers, but sometimes, but with those ledge holders, which I like to use, there's existing silver nitrate from the previous plate in there that you didn't wipe out, and or you haven't sealed your plate holder. And what I recommend people doing is using a polyurethane to seal that plate holder up, a waterproofing. It kind of puts like a, well, not kind of, it puts a shield or a protection against, it's waterproof. You can wipe it out really easy with a paper towel. So between each plate, you can wipe that ledge out or wipe your wires off or whatever it is and put your plate in, and you won't have those oysters and stains. The other one was when people get this kind of flat, general, muddy overall look on plates. Hey, I just started, I processed this plate, it looks terrible. What happens there is you have, there's a couple of different things. You have two things going on. You can either be overexposed, underdeveloped, overdeveloped, and or your silver bath isn't excited, or it's stealing iodides from the plate. And that's what I explained to one person this week. Why do you need to excite your silver bath? What is exciting your silver bath? To make good plates, plates that have nice tonal range, that are clean, that doesn't have any undeveloped or unexposed developed silver. That's easy for me to say. Unexposed developed silver on it, nice contrast, all that stuff. One of the first things you have to do, especially after you first, well, this is the only time you really do it, when you first make your silver bath, is to load that bath up with iodides. And the way we do that is we pour a plate, glass plate I recommend, put it in your silver bath and let it sit for a few hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, whatever, overnight, whatever you want to do. Pull the plate out. Now your bath is full of iodides. And what's important about that is when you pour a plate to make a photograph and you put it in your silver bath, if your silver bath isn't excited or iodized, it will take the iodides from the plate, from your collodion that you're trying to make a photograph with. It'll steal those. It'll basically rob your plate of iodides, which robs your plate of what? Iodides are responsible for contrast, tonal range. So you come out with you'll make an exposure, of course. You'll have an image on there, but it'll be flat and white, and it'll just be nasty. It won't wipe off. It's nothing like that. It's the iodides being stolen from the photographic plate. So people say, oh, after I made a couple of plates, the plate started looking good. And it's because you filled your bath up with iodides at that point in time, but you sacrificed 3 or 4 plates. And maybe 10 plates. If they're small plates, it'll take a lot more, right? If you're doing 8 by 10 or larger or something, it'll only take a couple, 3 plates. But it's best to iodize or excite your bath right after you make it, and then it won't rob your plate of the iodides. Now let's go to the other end of that spectrum. Uh-oh, I've got pinholes in my plates. What's going on? That's when your bath becomes so saturated with iodides that now you have iodide falling out and precipitating out onto the plate and creating little tiny holes. Now, this is very consistent. You don't have pinholes if you just have random pieces of dust or debris or whatever on the plate. The pinholes will be all over the plate. They'll show up as little black holes on metal plates and clear holes on glass, of course. And so at the end of the day, your bath is too saturated. There's a balance there, having enough iodides and having too much. So if you're consistently producing plates with pinholes in them and they're consistent over the plate or the image, that means you have to get rid of those iodides. And you do that with heavy maintenance, or I've started recommending just a third of distilled water in your silver bath. So if you have 1,000 mils, you'll add 300 mils or 320, and it'll get turbulent. It'll turn blue. That's all the iodides being pulled out of there. It'll turn blue and nasty. Sun it. All that material will drop out, reconstitute it. You can even evaporate away 100 or 200 mils of that water if you want. Evaporate that away. Check your hydrometer, check your silver content, and then check your pH and pull it back in. That way, and you don't have to put another plate in it to sensitize or excite your bath at that point. It's already, you're fine. You're just taking those excess iodides away. If you've ever had a silver bath that you've worked with and you've made plates and plates, and all of a sudden you're down 200 mils. So you take your distilled or deionized water and start pouring 200 mils in that silver bath and it turns blue. Those are the iodides pulling out of that. And the way to get rid of that, if it stays cloudy and blue, add a pinch or two of silver in it. That'll absorb that back in and balance that out, stir it up, and your bath will go clear again. So depending on where your iodide levels are and where your silver bath content is, that's going to pull those iodides out of solution. And that's what you want to do with maintenance. That's why you imbalance it with the water, right? The excess water pulls the iodides out. You sun that down, and no more pinholes. So those are a couple of things. Now, one of the last things I queried about was the solvent streaks. This is when your silver bath becomes saturated with solvents. The two solvents we use are alcohol and ether. And if you smell your bath and it smells strongly of solvents, it's always going to have a little tinge, of course, but if it smells really strong of solvents, you need to aerate that. What those solvents will do, they'll put lines or streaks on your plate. You put your plate down, you'll see lines and streaks, usually very even, not all the time. Sometimes they'll just make what they call model marks, just blotchy stuff. It's all kinds of stuff can happen. But you can stop that from happening if you don't have time to aerate your bath and you need to make plates. Every 30 seconds or so in the sensitization of the plate, pull the plate up out of the silver bath in safe light and just move that silver bath around. That'll prevent those streaks from happening until you can get rid of that solvent. I'm saying now the more important thing to do is get rid of that solvent, because it can really raise hell with the quality of your image. Jan says, have you ever used Farmer's Reducer hypo to reduce the fog and save the plate? I've played with that a little bit. And basically, you're just bleaching it, right? You're just eating silver away. That's what you're doing. So if you have unexposed silver on your plate that's developed, you can wipe that off with a cotton ball. If you have a light leak or complete overexposure, not due to developer reducing the halides, you can eat away with the Farmer's Reducer or ferrocyanide. You can eat away any silver you want. You can do that with potassium cyanide as well too, if you want. One of the things that people often ask me is, I haven't gone down a lot of these paths of manipulating the plates. What I've done is I've concentrated on how to make the best plates possible with the most consistency, rather than trying to take them into a Photoshop kind of environment. I've tried to make the plates get as good as I can with the light, the chemistry, composition, the technique of development, all those things, the best I can to make what I want to make and then stop. So a lot of times what people will end up doing, because they either don't have a project or they just enjoy making photographs to make photographs, what they'll do is they'll either end up really delving into the nitty gritty of, I'm going to do this to a plate, I'm going to try this to a plate, and it's fun, it's interesting, right? But there's no real purpose to it other than trying that, and that's fine. Or they'll get into the gear kind of acquisition thing. They'll start making cameras or parts for cameras or things like that. My interest has always been on the art side and or teaching the process. I guess you definitely could say that. But my main interest in the process is to work, to make my own work, to tell my own stories, to do those kinds of things. So I'm not a huge tinkerer, other than I've experimented a lot with different processes to see just aesthetically for my work, but I haven't ran down a lot of rabbit holes on, like, here's a plate that's underexposed or that's overexposed, or I want to get rid of the fog, or I want to get, I'm going to eat this away. I do little things, like if I don't like the blue in the summertime, the collodion will dry up and you'll get those blue edges on the plate. I'll put them down in the cyanide and eat those things away, those kinds of things. I mean, I guess that's as far as I really go with that, but I haven't really delved in to using chemistry and techniques to either manipulate or fix plates. And you can run into some really interesting things if you do it. I've just found I've had my hands full trying to make the work I want to make and trying to do it the best I can. But absolutely, there's all kinds of things you can approach that way. What else do we have? Yeah, so clean plates. So my recommendation, the biggest thing for that, and if you're listening or watching this later and you're the one or ones that ask the question, your plate holder edges, polyurethane, definitely, and let that off gas for a couple of days after you seal them up. I use a Minwax polyurethane. You can use about anything. It won't hurt the plates. It's like glass after you do it. They're easy to wipe out. Your material will last longer because if it's wood, you're going to soak that silver nitrate in. It's super corrosive. Your plate holders will go fairly quickly. Pay attention to wiping the excess silver off the back of your plate. Remember, you put that in your plate holder, you turn it upside down, you put it in your camera to make the exposure. Gravity's going to pull that down and wick that to the other side, and you're going to, that little capillary effect. You're going to have streaks and marks if your stuff isn't clean. So wipe all that excess silver off. Work as cleanly as you possibly can. And if you get into negatives, this is going to be really important, because unless you want that kind of heavy artifact, kind of, that whole look and feel, unless you want that, you're going to have a lot of it making negatives. Positives, you get away with a lot that you'll never see, but negatives are going to show stuff that you don't even see on the glass, honestly. Wow, where did that come from? I don't even see it on the plate, right? You're going to see everything on the negative. So the cleaner you work, the better images you're going to produce. And when I say better, I mean, is the baseline technical. If we talk about a nice photograph that's well exposed, that's properly developed, that's, all those things, that's when we talk about. Now, if you're not after that, that's fine. But if you get to know the process, and you can manufacture those artifacts the way you want them and how you want them for a certain effect or something you want to do, that's a whole different story. That's a different ball game altogether. But at the end of the day, what you want to do as an educator myself, teaching the process, what I want to try to get you on the path to learning is making all the right techniques, all the right handling and storage and usage of the chemistry, and making a proper plate, well exposed, well developed, executed properly, minimum requirements of chemistry and cost, all those things, right? That's my job as an educator. Then after you get that down, if you want comets, if you want oysters, if you want solvent streaks, if you want, whatever you want, if you want pinholes, whatever you want to do to the plates, that's your prerogative. But for me, I need to put out, safely handling, proper techniques developing, proper exposure, all those things. And everybody's different, right? Everybody likes, I hear people often say, wow, I'm surprised so many people like that image because it doesn't appeal to me, or I don't like the exposure, I don't like the composition, or it's not interesting to me, or whatever. Everyone's different. So to say proper image is really not, it's not fair, because it's all subjective and relative. So when we say baseline, what we're talking about, everybody knows what a well-exposed, properly composed, properly developed, and that kind of image, everybody kind of knows that. It just depends on what your story, what you're going for, right? I mean, you might want the dark, faces hanging on a background for something. I don't know. You might want the bright, super exposed images that, I don't know. Your thing is your thing. My job is to say, this is what I do to get these types of exposures with this type of light and this type of chemistry and lens. And that's what I try to teach. But everybody's a little different. Everybody's definitely different. All right. Let's see what we have over here as I ramble on. Do you recommend agitating the plate in the silver bath as opposed to just when streaks appear? Drew, that's a good question. So depending on, this is how I'm going to answer this. Depending on what type of silver bath you use. If you use trays and your plate is flat, I recommend agitating that every little bit. If you're using a vertical that's on a slight angle, once you put that plate in, ironically enough, that turbidity will take care of that. What you want to do is move that silver just a little bit. In fact, that's one of the reasons it gets rid of those solvent streaks, is because you're moving that, and you want that motion to go. So do you have to agitate in a vertical? No, you don't. You put it in, walk away for a couple of minutes or 3 minutes, whatever your timing is, come back. If you don't have the rivulets, pull it out and make your exposure. But I've actually found, as my bath gets a little bit older and I haven't had time to do a lot of maintenance on it, a little bit of agitation every minute or so definitely doesn't hurt. I've seen it. Number one, it sensitizes faster, especially in the warmer weather. It'll really speed up the sensitization. So that's a good question. But definitely, if you want to get rid of the solvent streaks, that'll do it. But it doesn't hurt if you're in a tray to agitate every 30, 40, 50 seconds, whatever, just to keep that silver moving a little bit. It'll help it. Perhaps not your favorite method, but any recommendations for a lens and flash setup for portraiture? I have a Deerdorf 8x10. This is from Tina. I have a Deerdorf 8x10 that just started shooting 5x7 and look for a bit of predictability. Yes, and that's another thing. It doesn't matter what I prefer or not, Tina. That's irrelevant. That's my personal thing. And like I said early in the broadcast here today, I teach all continuous light in workshops just for practicality. I mean, and you just said that. You're looking for a bit of predictability, and that's good. This is what I recommend. I had a Speedotron, two 2400 watt heads, 4800 watts total, a Speedotron strobe system that worked wonderfully. I could do one pop on 5.6 at about a meter away from the subject, and for a positive with ISO 1 collodion, and it produced a fine image. So look at those. Any strobe kit, what you're after is about 4,800 watt seconds. 2,400 watts would illuminate if you were close enough. I don't know that I'd want to put that head that close to a person, but with fresh chemistry, 24 to 4,800 watt strobe heads will do amazing. And even with the modern lens, it'll produce an image. Yeah, New England, again, if you're up in New England like that, you're gonna get that low light starting in September. Your window is going to shrink from about 10 to noon, or maybe even less a little bit depending on the day. But your weather's going to change, and every cloud, every overcast, all that's going to change. So I recommend people learn the techniques first. Learn development, especially. Everybody talks about pouring collodion. About every person that I've ever taught this process comes into a workshop and says, "Oh, I'm so nervous pouring collodion." It's like, don't be nervous pouring collodion. Be nervous about developing That's where you're going to screw up. And they all look at me kind of fun. Really? Yeah. And every single time that's true. Second or third plate, they've got the pouring down. As by the end of the day, they'll have the development technique down, because it's much more difficult to develop the technique to develop the plate than it is to cover the plate with collodion. Yeah, it might take you 1 or 2 plates to get the collodion pouring down, but at the end of the day, the technique you want to concentrate on is developing. So what I recommend people do when they're first starting out, don't worry about natural light or Petzval lenses or this new gadget or that new gadget. Don't get caught up in all that stuff. Get caught up in setting yourself up a nice little still life with artificial light. Work with small plates, 4x5, 5x7, something like that. Work with smaller plates so you don't use a lot of chemistry, and just photograph that subject or I don't use a person, use a still life as something, and photograph that until you have a perfectly well exposed plate that's developed perfectly and you feel comfortable with your workflow. Get that down before you ever take your camera outside, before you ever sit a person down in front. All you're going to do is get nervous and get really, you start out making portraits in this process and you haven't done this process a lot, it's going to be super frustrating for you. And you're not going to, probably not, I can't say always, but you're probably not going to have a lot of success, because there's a lot of plates spinning when you first start out. There's a lot of unknowns that only experience can give you, that you can't learn in a workshop, no matter whose workshop you go to, including mine. There's a lot of those things that you just have to do the time, right? 10,000 hours. You just have to do the time. And the only way you can do that is to pour plates and make images. To do that in the solace of your own peaceful place without distractions, with continuous light, so you can work in the middle of the night or the middle of the winter, and just do that until you have really clean, good plates. Then move on to your next thing. If you're a portrait photographer, start bringing some people in. Still work small, still work with artificial light. Then move on to going outside, shooting in some shade, right? Making plates in the shade. Start that process over again with a still life. Don't bring a person in. Set up your still life like you did in the beginning. Put it out in that north actinic shade light and start making exposures, and work on that until you get the exposures down. Then move on to negatives and start making negatives and making prints, and you'll have a lifetime of work. Believe me, you'll have a lifetime. I've been in the game 20 years, and I feel like some days I've just scratched the surface. So at the end of the day, there's so much to do, and you just take your time with it. Don't rush it. You'll have a much better experience, and cost-wise, safety-wise, everything. You'll have a much better experience if you start out tiny bites and get that experience. Get the techniques down. Don't spend a lot of money. Don't go out and buy a 16x20 camera and I want to make these giant plates, and you've never poured a plate before. You're going to spend a lot of money. You're going to be frustrated. You'll probably end up throwing the process away, to be honest with you. You get so frustrated. Jean says, is it a good thing to avoid using the same silver bath with different collodions? That is another good question. We've talked about that in the past, and if you have my book and you go to that illustration that shows the different slightly iodized, highly iodized collodion, there's 2 rows there, goes from kind of a light straw yellow color to a red color on the bottles. What Jean is asking about, you're going along, you've just made your silver bath, you've made 250 milliliters of collodion, and you've made 50 plates using that silver bath and that collodion. You ran out of that collodion. So now you make a new fresh batch of collodion. Guess what that is? That is that is slightly iodized collodion, right? Versus a bath that's been you've used either moderately iodized collodion, at least an orange, a yellow, a dark yellow, maybe even orange color by the time you finish that 250 milliliters. And what Jean is asking about, what you'll run into usually is you'll pour that plate and you're not going to have enough iodide in that to produce a nice image. So that's going to produce a flat white image. You need to allow, and one of the reasons I use NH4I or ammonium iodide in my collodion exclusively, and especially for negatives, is it iodizes quickly. It breaks down quickly. And so my collodion changes color fairly fast. And again, I want that darker yellow into that orange color to make the proper tonal range image. So yes, when you switch collodions using the same silver bath, you're going to have, if you use that right away, most of the time, you're not going to get the tonal range. Even if it produces a good image, you won't get that tonal range you will if you let that collodion break down a little more and get more iodized. So yeah, it doesn't, you can do that. It doesn't hurt anything. I'm just saying in the beginning of a fresh batch of collodion, that especially if you're using a potassium salt, it's not going to be iodized enough for that bath. And you're going to see the difference. Most of you probably have already seen that, to be honest with you. That's a very common question I get. I don't get it in that form. I get it, what's wrong with this plate? And I step people back through the history, and 9 times out of 10, they say, oh, I ran out of that collodion and I made a fresh batch of collodion and I'm still using everything else. And I just tell them to let that collodion iodize more. And it doesn't have to be orange, just needs to break down to a yellow color, and you'll produce better images. Even if you produce an image, it'll be better once that gets more more iodides, or not highly iodized, but more iodides in it. So good question though. Tim says, yesterday I accidentally sensitized a plate for 10 minutes. Yes, I was asked. What's the harm in doing this? That's a great question. Depending on the temperature of your bath and the pH of your bath, 2 things can happen. He says that he left a plate in for 10 minutes. I've left him in for up to 20 minutes. Still produces an image, right? Maybe not as good as image at 15 or 20 minutes. But 2 things that can happen. If your bath is pH 4 or pH 5, you're going to take a ton of silver out of that bath. You're gonna apply a ton of silver onto that plate. So your silver, you might even be able to check your silver content after and see a drop in that with your percentage or your hydrometer. And secondly, if you're making positives, you just don't need that amount of silver on that plate. If you're making positives, I talked about before, you want a tiny amount of silver. That's why your pH is acidic or more acidic, and your time is a lot shorter, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, maybe 2.5 minutes, whatever it is. Just enough when those rivulets are gone off the plate, you have enough silver for a positive. Because you're making a very, very thin negative when you're making a positive. You're just either making it on black or backing it with black or whatever you're doing. So the longer your silver sits in the bath and the higher your pH is, the more silver content you're going to put on it. That's why I'll let my negatives go to pH 5, and I'll let them sit in my bath for 4 or 5 minutes and really, really build that up, because I want that, right? I want that as much density as I can get, not in the positives, but the negatives. Otherwise, there's no harm in doing it. You know, I mean, you'll run into muddle and mucky problems. You may have at 10 minutes, as warm as it has been here. But John says, I mean, should I use a potassium salts collodion with 1 dedicated to silver bath, cadmium with? No, it doesn't matter, John. The salts won't matter. The only thing that matters is potassium isn't solvent in the solvent, so you're going to have a longer time iodizing that collodion. In other words, a longer time changing colors. Gives you more shelf life, right? But it's going to take longer. As far as saying I use potassium salts in this collodion in this silver bath versus cadmium or ammonium or whatever you're using in another, doesn't matter. Salts are salts. In the silver bath, it doesn't really care. It's the amount of iodides in the collodion that we're talking about there. How far it's broken down or not. How much tonal range it gives or not. That kind of thing. It does matter that your silver bath is iodized, right? We talked about that. So that does matter. You're very welcome, guys. Absolutely. I'm happy to answer anything like that. So Tim, tell us, did you process that plate for 10 minutes? Did you see anything off on that? I've let him sit in there for a long time, and I haven't seen anything other than a buildup of silver. And if I do that too often, all of a sudden I need to add 6 or 8 grams of silver nitrate. So, and you just don't need to use that much silver. You just don't need to use that. And if your pH is quite high, that'll really eat it up. If you're making negatives, perfect. That's a whole different ball game. But for positives, no. 2 or 3 minutes in the bath, pH 3, pH 4, you're good. All right. What else do we have, guys? Anything? I need to get a drink. I think the humidity here today is like 11%. So let's see.
Quinn.
Please.
Quinn.
Yes, sir.
On the last Tuesday, I had my first check of my knowledge about wet plate. I shoot that day 13 plates, 9 outside. I have model and I have stylist.
I remember, yes.
It was windy weather, and it was windy weather with sun and the clothing drifting. So I have to use my head 8 seconds. Oh, sun gone. 10 seconds, 11 seconds. But I make 13 plates and everything spot on. I was so happy because the 9 first was outside the house, and I go into my studio. I use the flashlights and take 4 there. Spot on, spot on. And I had the plate was so clean. I never seen that before. I was so in focus. I said to her, my photo friend stylist, I said to her, next time, maybe horrible.
I'm telling you, it goes like that, Jan. It goes like that.
But I was very happy to master it. You have 2 people around you, stress you up, make a scene, and you have the light changing.
Yeah.
And you have on yourself your chemie, everything. I use 2 dark holders.
Yeah.
One back up. I changed it because I'm not cleaning, going fast. But I'm so happy working good. Thanks for a good book, Quinn.
Yeah. Well, hey, you're very welcome, Jan. Thanks for sharing your experience. And that's true. You will experience. And I don't think it's completely. You're very consistent with making plates. So that experience, and I tell people this: you can't teach this. You cannot teach it. People have to make plates. They have to work in their own environment. And that is, like you said, that's a stressful environment. To have people around you, to be outdoors, to have the changing light. That's the most stressful environment you can have. So that is wonderful that happened to you. But don't be surprised if next time it doesn't, like you say, next time it doesn't go so well, because it can just turn on a dime and nothing works. I have been humbled. I have been put in my place by the Collodion gods, let's say. Confident, my chemistry's on, I know what I'm going to do, my light's right, here's my stuff, boom, 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 I'm going to knock this out of the park. I go out there and it fails. Everything fails. A complete disaster. I get nothing. And man, I am humbled. I am put back into my place and I start over again. And then other times, like you say, most of the time, and I have to knock on wood here a little bit, most of the time I'm in the middle range. I can get 1 or 2 plates that I'm absolutely happy about, but I have failures all the time. I mean, failures in that I'm not producing exactly what I want to produce. Not necessarily, I mean, some developer sweeps or some odd thing here, the wind blows this way and I have this happen or whatever. But it's more just quantity. I go out with a few plates and I hope to come home with a couple. There you go. Let me see. How do I blow this up? There, I can blow that up. Oh yeah, there's your Caravaggio. Look at that Italian painting from the Renaissance era. Look at that. There you go. Very period. I wouldn't expect that from a Norwegian, but very nice. Very good. Very good. Very good. Say that again, Jan. You have to unmute yourself.
This model is from USA.
Oh, she's from USA?
Yeah, she's from USA.
Oh, great. Well, you did a great job. That very painterly, very, you know what would be beautiful is to do one of those portraits like that on a glass and make an oil print of it. Boy, that would just be fantastic. I think you'd be throwing back to that Renaissance period. She's very, very fair skin. You see how that skin blew out? Like it's almost like a painting, so to speak. That's, yeah, pure silver. You probably saw that body flash right up in the developer, right?
Yes, I do.
Right up, right? That's your highlights in 3 or 4 seconds or 2 or 3 seconds. Very nice. I like it. So Tim said, yeah, go ahead.
It was so exciting to see. This was the second plate, and this was one of my favorites. And I see, wow, I have so good feeling. I'm rocking.
Isn't that great? There is really, I know exactly what you're saying. There is nothing more satisfying than to work and spend time and energy, and then to have that gifted to you that way. That is an amazing feeling. I know
and my stylist say she is fixing for me, help me fixing, and you see, she wanted workshop with me.
There you go. Yeah. What did the sitter think? What did the lady think of her plates?
She had the taken plates before the model, but she never have seen so clean plates. So she think our master is so great. So I'm so thankful to get that back.
That's great.
I'm so happy for that day. But I know next time something I mess up.
Hey, just be prepared. Maybe not. Maybe you'll get lucky. But just, I tell people in this process, just be prepared. You can plan. You can get your ducks in a row. But a lot of times you're just going to have to. Some days you just have to say, "Hey, today isn't the day I make photographs." I mean, that's the reality of it. I don't care who you are. You can say what you want to with this process. Some days you just, whatever it is, it's that whatever it is, whether it's good or bad, some days you just can't make plates, and you just have to say next time. And then most of the time, experience is just such a wonderful teacher. Most of the time you're gonna do well, especially if you keep at it. I tell people, you get into it 2 or 3 years, you should be able to, move on to the meat. You should be fairly confident. You should be able to do commercial gigs and feel confident if you want to do that. But if you just dabble in it once or twice a year, these are skills and techniques that it's not a bicycle necessarily. You need to practice. You need to keep going. And that's what I've always been fearful of is getting away from it for too long and then coming back and stumbling around. But I seem to find my way back even with my breaks. So Tim says, I ended up using the plate, but it was an overexposure. So yeah, it would have been interesting to hear. But I think leaving your plate in the bath is you don't want to do it if you can avoid it. But yeah. Tim Fry asks, Jan, what was your lighting setup for that portrait?
I have two 1500 watts of brown colors strobe monolights. Two 1500 watts. One with the beauty dish, 1 meter away to the side, and I have one on 45 degrees with a long reflector shoot like from 2 meters away, and I have bowens from under the face, so I have light up here with 1100 watts, and I have apparature f8, I think, with 300 millimeter size lens. I want it a little soft, so that's I got nearly blowout.
Yeah. So brown color strobes. How many watts total?
Total 4,100.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect.
Yes, 4,100.
Perfect.
1,500, 1,500, and 1,100 up.
Yep. Perfect. Yeah, that's about right. And that's why I said around 4,800 watt seconds, however you configure that. Again, 2,400 watts, if you pop it, you're just going to have kind of a head floating there. But even at 5.6, you'll get it even, you're at F8 and you were a meter away. So that's about right in what people end up with the. How old was your Collodion?
I make what's I call Bortelin make. I make a tutti frutti. I take new fresh Collodion, only 1 week old, at your receipt, and I mix it together with old ones I had from last time.
Yep.
And I also had from before a little negative Collodion in.
So you're really highly iodizing this Collodion. You see what he's doing there?
Yes. So I get very good contrast if I want.
Yep. Yeah, it's science, guys. There's no denying. If you learn the science and the chemistry behind this, you can do whatever you want with it. If you understand how the iodides and the bromides as well too, but mainly the iodides work in this, how your silver bath, the double decomposition works, how your exposure, what it's sensitive to, how your developer works, pretty soon you'll have a great understanding and a good handle on not only making great images or good images, but troubleshooting, problem solving. You'll have a better technique, a better understanding. That's why I really encourage people, if they're going to do a workshop, take a workshop from somebody that can explain the chemistry to you, that really can tell you in layman's terms what problems come up, why they come up, how to usually resolve them, definitely how to handle the chemistry too, for safety and that stuff. But really, I define a workshop as different than a demonstration. If you go to a workshop and all you do is pour plates and watch somebody do it, and then you make a couple of plates, that's kind of a demonstration. A workshop is getting down into the nitty-gritty. Let's talk about chemistry. Let's talk about how the process works. What happens when you put the plate in the silver? What happens when you pour the developer on? Why is this technique important and that isn't? How do you handle this chemistry versus that chemistry? Those are really important, and I highly encourage people, and I definitely encourage you to take a workshop if you can, but just make sure you take a workshop that's going to be worth your time. Not only the money spent, but you're beginning your journey there. You're not learning the process there. You're beginning the journey there, and you want to be effective, safe, and let's be practical. You don't want to spend a bunch of money wasting chemistry and making mistakes. And I mean, you're going to do a little of that, but you want to minimize that. So a good workshop that explains how the process works, the safety behind it, good techniques, all that, really, really super important. And that's what I encourage people to do. 10 months, Jan, has been almost a year. Well, that's very, very good. You're very fortunate to be on that path. And that experience is the best teacher ever. So keep on pouring plates, guys. That's what I always say. Best teacher ever, right? I mean, only, I think I can teach most people. I can get them started in wet plate. But I always say this, I can't teach him wet plate. I can only get him started. I can give you my experience and my advice, and I can give you the chemistry, and I can give you the technical part of it, no problem. But at the end of the day, it's you, that piece of substrate, that lens, your chemistry, the light, and just dialing that in and feeling that out and knowing where to go with it, making, both your heart and your head working together and making that image the best, or whatever you're after, best, I should air quote, best image possible that you want, right? It's not what I want. It's not what, the book says or that book says. It's what you want and how you accomplish that. I think success comes when you can pour a plate, you can set up a scene or come to a scene, you can pour a plate, you can be confident in your composition, confident in your exposure, confident in your technique, and walk away from there with a successful image, however you define that, right? It's what you have in your head I think the best part about it for me is having a concept of having this kind of story or this narrative or this topic that I want to explore or discuss, and saying, what is visually the best way to accomplish that? How can I engage that viewer to say, let's have a conversation about this topic, or engage them with the photographs and say, have them ask, why did you make that portrait? Wow, that is weird, or that is interesting, or that is beautiful, or that is ugly, whatever it is. And how best can I engage them to start having a conversation about the topic that I'm interested in? So I look at art or image making as a catalyst or a go-between to have a conversation about what it is you're interested in. And if it's beauty, if it's, history, if it's some contemporary subject, I'm not really interested in coronavirus stuff, but I mean, whatever people want to do, I guess. I just don't have any interest in that at all. I don't know why it is. There's nothing there for me to, I don't know. It is what it is. I guess maybe hindsight, history will look at me and say, why didn't you make photographs about coronavirus? I don't know. I think there's pressing issues for me personally that I like to work on. And so I like to have the toolkit or the arrows in my quiver that I can pull different arrows out for different types of, the toolkits or the arrows in my quiver that give me the ability to engage people, to have a conversation. That's the most important thing for me, is if my artwork stirs some conversation or ask a question and that we can have a conversation from, that is successful artwork for me. I mean, beauty is one thing, right? Making beautiful photographs is wonderful. That's great. But we're left at that. That's a beautiful photograph. And then we can't engage anymore, right? And this is something people work on after they've been involved in it for a while. After you've, I say gone through kind of your milk phase, you move on to your meat phase. Once you say, okay, I've made enough of these photographs, I've made enough, beautiful artwork or beautiful this or whatever it is, they usually get engaged in some kind of subject or topic that they're really interested in, and then make work around it, right? So like I said earlier, a musician, a writer, or a writer and a musician writing songs and playing music, you usually have this kind of, narrative, a beginning, a middle, and an end, at least to engage people with and tell a story. A movie, right? Watching a movie, there's a storyline to it, right? Sometimes. Actually, my favorite movie is Gummo. It's probably the only movie without a storyline. Here I am preaching about a storyline, and I love Harmony Korine's Gummo. But typically what I used to love just to make photographs of light and play with light and see what light would do and what does this glass look like. I love to photograph glass and metal in Collodion. I just love to look at what they look like, right? There was no big narrative or anything there. They were just fun and beautiful to look at. And it was good practice for me and all that. But at some point, I knew I wanted to use the process for what I've made and work-wise, and so that's what I've done. But I think it's important to engage people, and I think art should be socially active, and I think it's one of the best ways to engage people. Oh, really? Many of my friends were in kids. Yeah, that's the only Korine movie that I didn't really care for, and I think Larry Clark was involved in that one too, which is, I love his photographs, his Tulsa work, but that's really interesting. My absolute favorite, Gummo, and I love Julie and Donkey Boy as well too. Those are probably two of my favorite movies. But oh wow, Jan, 400 to 500 plates. No wonder, brother, you're racking them up. Excellent. That is really good. So anyway, yeah, I know I rant about this conceptual art thing all the time, but practice makes perfect. Get your 10,000 hours in, then work on your project or work on projects. People love, I know this, people love to engage with a good story. And that's what we do every day. We pick up a book, we turn a movie on, we listen to music, we go to a play. All that is someone else's narrative that you're looking at and saying, do I connect with this or not? That's all we just spend time in other people's world. You all came in today to spend time in my world, which I'm greatly thankful for and participate in as well. But at the end of the day, that's all we do, right? Whether it's a book, a movie, a play, a music, we're just engaged in another human being's experience about what it is to live and the questions we have. And how do we make the world better, hopefully? Or how do we ask questions that engage people to get them to think? I'm fearful of this lack of critical thinking today, but that's just me. Maybe I'm too high in altitude up here. I don't know. But anyway, I appreciate so much you guys coming in, and I'll end it there. We're at an hour and a half. I'll end it there, and I really appreciate your engagement, your questions. Send me more questions. I get 3 or 4 a week, and I try to cover them generally every week. So if you have questions or you want to come in and just chat or just hang out, I love having everybody, and I truly appreciate you. I do. And if you haven't got my book, it is up on Amazon. It's not the edition book, but it's there, and I appreciate your support there as well too. And I will see you next Saturday. How about that? Have a great weekend. Stay safe and stay healthy. Ciao, ciao. Bye-bye.